You know, growing up in an African household is like living in a sitcom that never quite makes it to prime time. You have the drama, the comedy, and the occasional plot twist that leaves you questioning your sanity. And if you've ever had the privilege or the challenge of being raised by African parents, you know they have some of the most creative parenting hacks that leave you both amazed and slightly terrified. So, let's dive into some of the funniest African parenting hacks that will make you laugh, reminisce, and maybe even cringe a little. First up, let's talk about the classic, if you're bored, I have a solution for you. You know how it goes. You're lounging around, scrolling through your phone, and suddenly your mum walks in with that look. You brace yourself for what's coming next. You're bored? Okay, I'll give you something to do. And before you know it, you're knee-deep in chores. You thought you were going to binge watch your favourite show, but instead, you're scrubbing the floors, washing the dishes, and cleaning the windows. It's like they have a radar for boredom, and their response is always the same. Boredom is a luxury we cannot afford. And then there's the infamous "your cousin did this" tactic. You know when your mum wants you to do something and she pulls out the "your cousin" card. Your cousin in Canada is already a doctor at 25. What are you doing with your life? Suddenly, you're not just competing with your cousin, you're competing with an entire continent. You could be sitting there, minding your own business, and then your mom drops that bomb. It's like an Olympic event where you're always trying to outrun the achievements of your relatives. But honestly, who knew that having a cousin could be such a motivational tool? Now, let's talk about the African time concept. Growing up, you learn that time is merely a suggestion. If your parents say dinner is at 6 p.m., you better be prepared for a surprise dinner at 8 p.m. And don't even think about being the punctual child. You'll be greeted with a hearty, "Why are you so early? Did you not have anything to do?" It's like they're trying to teach you that being late is an art form. And the best part? When you finally do arrive on time, they act like you've committed a crime. What's wrong with you? Are you sick? Apparently, being on time is just as suspicious as being late. Speaking of time, let's not forget the classic "I'll just give you a little taste" strategy. You know when you're craving a snack and you ask your parents for something? They'll hand you a piece of fruit or a small serving of whatever it is you wanted, and then they'll say, "Just a taste." But the catch is, that taste is never enough. You're left with the tiniest morsel, and your parents will act like they've just given you the keys to the kingdom. See, you're not even hungry anymore. You're left there, staring at the crumbs, wondering if you should negotiate for more, or if you should just accept your fate. And let's not forget the legendary "this is for your own good" line. You know when your parents sit you down for a serious talk, and you can feel the weight of the world on your shoulders. They'll tell you about the importance of education, responsibility, and hard work, all while you're just trying to figure out how to survive high school algebra. This is for your own good, they say, as they hand you a stack of books thicker than your entire body. It's like they're preparing you for a life of academic warfare, and you're just trying to pass your next math test. But you know what? Deep down, you appreciate it. Because years later, when you're sitting in a meeting and someone asks you to calculate the budget, you'll remember that moment of parental wisdom. Now let's talk about the African parent's phone. You know how every African household has that one phone that's like a family heirloom? It's usually an ancient Nokia or a flip phone that's been passed down through generations. And when your parents get their hands on it, it's like they've just unlocked the secrets of the universe. They'll call you from that phone, and you'll be like, "Mom, why are you using that?" And she'll respond, "It works perfectly fine." Meanwhile, you're trying to explain to her that technology has advanced, and there are now smartphones that can do everything except cook dinner. But no, she's perfectly content with her relic from the past, and you just have to accept that some battles are not worth fighting. And how about the classic "you'll thank me later" line? You know when your parents make you do something that feels utterly ridiculous at the time. You'll thank me later, they say, as you're standing in the middle of a family gathering, forced to recite a poem in front of relatives you barely know. You're sweating bullets, and all you can think about is how you'll never forgive them for this moment. But fast forward a few years, and you're at a wedding, and the DJ asks for a volunteer to give a toast. Suddenly, those cringe-worthy moments of your childhood come rushing back, and you realize they were right. You're up there, speaking eloquently, and you can almost hear your parents' smug voices in the background saying, "See, I told you so." Now let's discuss the food as a form of love hack. In African households, food is not just sustenance, it's an expression of love. You could be having the worst day ever, and your mum will whip up a feast that could rival a 5-star restaurant. You're not feeling well? Let me make you some jollof rice. Suddenly, your troubles fade away as you indulge in a plate of food that's been seasoned with love, sweat, and a dash of guilt. And don't even think about leaving the table without finishing your plate. There are starving children in Africa, she'll remind you, as you try to push your food away. It's a guilt trip like no other, and you know you're not winning this battle. And let's not forget the cultural education that comes with being raised in an African home. You're not just learning about your own culture, you're getting a crash course in every other culture your parents can think of. Did you know that in Nigeria, we celebrate New Year's with a feast that lasts for 3 days? Your parents will regale you with stories of their childhood, and you'll find yourself nodding along, even if you have no idea what they're talking about. But it's all part of the experience, and somewhere along the way, you gain a deep appreciation for your heritage, even if it comes with a side of embarrassment. Then there's the family meeting phenomenon. You know when your parents call for a family meeting and your heart sinks. You immediately start bracing yourself for the worst. We need to talk about your grades, they say, and you know you're in for it. But the twist is, these meetings often turn into a comedy show. Your dad will start telling embarrassing stories from his childhood, and suddenly, you're all laughing together, forgetting the initial reason for the meeting. It's like a therapy session wrapped in humor, and you realize that even the serious talks can have a light-hearted twist. Let's not overlook the fashion advice that comes from African parents. You know when you're getting ready for school and your mom walks in with that judging look? "Are you really going out in that?" she'll ask, as if you're about to walk the runway. And then she'll pull out an outfit from her own closet that she insists is more appropriate. You end up wearing something that looks like it came straight out of a time capsule, and you can't help but feel like you're being sent to a fashion tribunal. But years later, when you look back at those outfits, you realize your parents were just trying to keep you from making the same fashion mistakes they did. And we can't forget the discipline methods that are unique to African parenting. You know how they say, spare the rod and spoil the child? Well, in many African households, that rod is not just a metaphor. You grow up with the knowledge that your parents have eyes in the back of their heads, and they can hear everything. You think you're being sneaky, but somehow they always know when you've been up to no good. And when they finally catch you, it's like a scene from a movie. "Do you know how much I sacrificed for you?" They'll go on about their struggles, and you'll be sitting there, half terrified and half amused, wondering how you got yourself into this mess. And let's not forget the African parents' version of encouragement. You know how in Western cultures, parents are all about positive reinforcement? In African households, it's a bit different. You did well on your exam, but what about that math test? Your parents will find a way to turn your successes into a challenge. It's like they're trying to prepare you for the harsh realities of life. And while it can be frustrating, you eventually realize that it's their way of pushing you to be better. You learn to celebrate your victories, but you also learn that there's always room for improvement. Now let's talk about the family gatherings that are a staple of African culture. You know when your parents drag you to a family reunion and you're dreading the inevitable questions from relatives? When are you getting married? What are you doing with your life? It's like a rite of passage, and you can't escape it. But once you're there, you realize it's not so bad. You get to eat amazing food, hear hilarious stories, and bond with family members you didn't even know you had. And by the end of the day, you're laughing, dancing, and feeling grateful for the chaos that is family. And let's not forget the classic, "You're not going out looking like that" line. You know when you're getting ready to go out with friends, and your mom walks in with that disapproving look. Where do you think you're going dressed like that? It's like they have a sixth sense for detecting questionable fashion choices. And you try to explain that it's just a casual outing, but they're not having it. You end up changing into something that makes you feel like you're going to a job interview instead of hanging out with friends. But deep down, you know they just want you to look your best, even if it means sacrificing your personal style. And finally, let's talk about the unconditional love that comes with being raised by African parents. Despite all the challenges, the embarrassment, and the occasional cringe-worthy moments, there's a bond that's unbreakable. You know that no matter what, your parents have your back. They might drive you crazy, but they're also your biggest cheerleaders. They want the best for you, and that love shines through in everything they do. So, there you have it. Some of the funniest African parenting hacks that have shaped our lives. They may seem unconventional, but they come from a place of love, tradition, and a desire to prepare us for the world. And as we navigate our own lives, we carry those lessons with us, often laughing at the absurdity of it all. Because at the end of the day, being raised by African parents is a unique experience that leaves you with stories to tell and a heart full of gratitude.